ladies and gentlemen, independent Americans around the country and around the world, and especially inside of Afghanistan, we are going to continue a really important, really dynamic focus on what's happening in Afghanistan and why it's so much bigger than Afghanistan. We are bringing back one of our most popular guests, one of my dearest friends, one of my personal heroes, and a person who is really perfect for this moment in history to help us understand all of it. The great and powerful Zainab Salbi is back on Independent Americans. Welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. I wish I feel great and powerful, but thank you very much for the endorsement. Humbled to be here in this presence and love all of your shows and follow it closely. What a pleasure to be back here. Thank you.
Well, it's my honor to have you back. The last time you joined us was May 2019, and it was episode 9. We were very early. It's almost 120 episodes later. We were in person in the Classic Car Club. Now the whole world has changed. We have a new president. We're living in new places. We're doing media differently. But you are a very thoughtful and I think powerful, internally powerful person. And so I've been asking everyone since the pandemic started, and I'd love to ask you, where are you and how are you?
Well, just before the pandemic, I had a pre-experience with not COVID, with a severe case of Lyme disease that took me to the hospital and operating room and ICU, and really put an encounter, forced an encounter with death, as I thought that I was grasping for my last breath at one moment. And frankly, the first word that came out of me breathing and my new breath was not whether I accomplished enough in life or not whether I got acknowledgement or not, frankly, particularly not whether I was, featured in the media or not. It was kindness. And as a result, I fundamentally changed my life. I moved to the countryside. I now live in a log cabin, actually was owned by Edward R. Murrow. Was built by Edward R. Murrow, as a matter of fact, a man who stood for truth in America. So it's a great honor that I live in his cabin. I live in the, I clean after horses, and I garden my garden, and I take care of my cat. And I shifted, and that shift is for several reasons. One is living in the city was sort of, for me, I love the city, of course, but it was also disconnecting me from nature. And nature, when I was very vulnerable, health-wise and emotional-wise, nature was my cheerleader. I felt it helped me breathe. It helped me walk again. It helped cheer, yeah, you can do it. Every tree was my friend. And so I feel indebted to nature, honestly. And I decided to live there and closer to it, and to sort of simplify my life, so I can hear the wisdom of nature, and I can hear my heart much more. And to be very, very honest, I mean, at one point I was watching the news when I was very sick, and I was like, oh my God, that's divisive. And it's like, whoa, I didn't even know, to be being part of it, that the division, even the good guys were creating unconsciously, and rather than how do we look into our unity with ourselves, with each other, and with nature. Anyway, so that was my life. That is my life, rather, until a month and a half ago, I lost sense of time when I got a call from a friend and a fellow board member in the International Refugee Assistance Program, and said, Zainab, their Afghan women are threatened. The Afghan women leaders are threatened. They have been, they discovered a list of assassinations, already assassinated women, and plus a list of women to be assassinated, and there is no plan to evacuate them. And Paul, I tell you, after living 2 years of rebuilding my life and my ability to breathe and to walk and to think, and, in my garden, all like it felt, as a friend said, it's the return of the Jedi. I went to the closet, symbolically and got my Jedi sword. And I was like, what? My Afghan sisters are in danger? And two things to mention here. One is there are moments in history where all bets are off and we all need to show up, right? For me, that was one of these moments. I can't show up in every moment. There are moments, and we rotate in the moments, right? Some people take this moment, some people, this was for me a moment that is close to my heart. And I had, worked in war zones for 20 years as the founder of Women for Women International. And then I covered wars as a journalist. And then, I'm in climate change right now. I founded Daughters for Earth and climate. And I was like, what? Afghan, there are no evacuation plans for women leaders? Excuse me? I know we talked a lot about no evacuation plans for interpreters and allies and the people who help the US military, but there were no evacuation plans for women leaders who are visually recognizable. And I pick up the phone and call my colleagues at Women for Women, and I'm told a story that in the last year, since the Taliban were invited to be in negotiation with the US and the Afghan government, they have been silently assassinating not only predominantly women leaders, but all the intellectuals and all the artists in the different provinces, right? So it's like boom, 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 boom. That according to the local colleagues that I spoke with, that by the time the last few months that they start taking, and when part of the reason where people saying giving up their arms and not fighting is because a campaign of fear and terror has been happening systematically by the Taliban as the US was the Afghan government as well, but it was mandated by the US government, was in negotiation with them. Not only were they assassinating these women, I say women leaders, but also again, intellectuals, journalists, artists, they were also distributing flyers. This is the knowledge I'm getting early August, honestly, or maybe late July. I really lost sense of time, right? Mm-hmm. Flyers that they will send me. They're saying, here are the new rules of operation. Women can no longer leave without a guardian. Men have to grow beards. No more music allowed. No more meats. They mention meat because pork in Islam is not allowed. And and maybe they associate pork with the US presence, but no more pork sold in any store or whatever it is, right? And it was like, so we've known. Here's the thing, Paul, there must be, I can't imagine there was no knowledge. I didn't know because I was in my garden working on climate change, right? But there was knowledge. There must have been knowledge that there was systematic assassination and a campaign of terror that was happening in the last year. And that when they took Afghanistan, one province at a time, really, 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 really quick and got to Kabul, it should not have been a surprise. And I don't understand, and I'm very irritated, to be very honest, by anyone who's saying, well, they're saying we're gonna allow women to study or girls to study. It's like there was no reason whatsoever. There is no reason to believe them. And another thing I want to say, I worked in wars, as you said, as you know. I have lost so many women friends in Iraq, in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen. When I say friends, they are women leaders in the women's rights movement or in the democratic movements. One of an amazing woman in Libya gets assassinated for simply telling people on Facebook, telling the youth, go and vote, right? She gets assassinated inside her home as she was wearing her nightgown in her forehead, right? We are talking about women always get assassinated the first. It's because it's low-hanging fruits. People still don't take the women's assassination or death or rape or violence very seriously. And what I'm saying is that, for God's sake, they only start violence groups, militias, radicals, fundamentalists, terror. They always start with women, always. And rather than seeing it on the side, we've got to see it as an indicator for a new trajectory to come.
Thank you for setting the table.
I am very passionate on this.
I know this is exactly why I wanted you on the show, because I was going to ask you to set the stage for what it was like in Afghanistan right now for women, but you've set that stage and the larger stage. And I have been overwhelmingly critical of this debacle. I've called it the great American betrayal of Afghanistan. But it's also the betrayal of the Afghan people. It's a betrayal of Afghan women. It's also the betrayal of American veterans. And we had Admiral Mullen on last week saying, I don't know why they didn't plan better. This is, he agreed it was a debacle. But there's still this calcified group in the U.S. that I really want to get at with you, because what I've been surprised by is frankly Democrats who say we stand for women's rights. We are outraged about what's happening in Texas, but Afghanistan was going to happen that way anyway, right? And a lot of people defending Biden's refusal to acknowledge mistakes. And what we have now in many ways is a war on women and others. But, if this was happening somewhere else and we weren't involved, we'd consider it a genocide. And most liberals especially would be wanting to intervene. Where's the disconnect here, Zainab? How can people who stand for human rights and who will be a part of the Women's March, and I'm really talking to many activists on the left in America, why do they have a blind spot here? Is it because there's a dehumanization of Afghans? Or can you get at why, and that many of them are your friends, my friends, I've got friends on all political sides, but there's a unique thing happening right now among Democrat leaders especially, where they're saying it's not our problem, it would have happened anyway, it's not that bad. Can you pull that apart? Because I feel like there's not enough outrage, frankly, right? And I'm drawing that connection because I see the outrage in America around Texas, which is warranted. There's a war on women in many different ways. But there's essentially a genocide happening inside of Afghanistan, and people don't want to hear it. So already the media has shifted attention, and Biden wants to put it in the rearview mirror and say, look at how many we got out, but he doesn't talk about the denominator and how many were left behind. So can you pull that apart from your political and strategic understanding of this country and our politics? Why are they letting this happen?
I tell you, I'll be very honest here. Beside the loss of, or the betrayal, as you said it, of veterans and allies and Afghan women and men, we have lost something even more fundamental, in my opinion. And that is the moral ground in which the US stood on for the last decades. I don't know for how long, decades. Do you know how much US invested in selling these moral values and having walls, the world, from leaders from all over the world, activists, youth, risking their lives and fighting and stepping up and holding these values and fighting for them for change in their own countries? That moral ground that the world was looking up to the US is erased. And I say it to you bluntly, it got chipped on 20 years ago, not only invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, but on how it was managed. And then it got chipped on, like, it's got diluted. And then you have also Trump that chipped on. But right now, I tell you, I'm from Iraq originally, as you know. My friends are from all over the world. I was in Turkey, a month ago. People like, the US was a country we used to look up to. We used to aspire to become like in our moral values, in our democracy, in our freedom. And now we look at it with like, what? This is what the US. So the loss for me is to the soul
Mm.
It's to the seed of what made the US the great country.
Mm.
You
And
know,
it's
so
happening. It's happening the week of the UN speech, right? So Biden goes and speaks to the UN, and tries to reset the table to say, "I'm not Trump. We're gonna go first with the State Department and diplomacy instead of the military." But in my view, Biden's been talking out both sides of his mouth since this started back in April, because to your point, negotiating with the Taliban is like, this is like the Handmaid's Tale. This is like negotiating with Gilead. Okay, like these are people who are doing bad things, but there's become this kind of okayism with the Taliban and this normalizing of the Taliban, while at the same time, something I focused on, creating the otherism of the Afghans. And it seems to me like it's Biden. It's him. He's saying they didn't fight hard enough. They didn't stand up. That we tried and they didn't want it enough, right? Which is really questioning, in my view, their heart and their integrity and their humanity. Because what would we have done if the Taliban rolled through New York or Texas? Like, many of us would have put down our guns and said, I'll live to fight another day. And there's also something else happening that I think you know more about than almost anyone. The appearance of peace, right? This honeymoon period where people say, oh, Afghans are tired of war. Well, there's less war because a ton of people are dead, a ton of people have left, and a ton of people are hiding. So just like, the Iraqi surge where everything got split among ethnic lines, this is almost a paper mache peace. Or it's a victory for the Taliban where they can maintain it. So can you get to the core of do you think Biden understands Afghanistan?
I want to say a few points here.
Yeah.
Because I am very upset at Biden right now. And honestly, if there's an election today, he definitely lost my respect and my vote. Definitely. And it's very sad because I'm a hardcore Democrat. But I am sick and tired of leaders who give good speeches, and him in particular claimed women's rights and gave all these good speeches in Women's Month and all of that, but speak from here and act from here. And at the roots of his, in my opinion, is honestly two things. One is deep prejudice on, this is what I feel as a Muslim, right? I'm American, I'm a Muslim, but this is what I really truly feel, Paul, and I'm just telling it to you bluntly. I feel there is a deep, deep disrespect of human lives when it comes to Muslims. Mm-hmm. And there is a deep prejudice that Muslims mean a bunch of thugs and terrorists and oppressors of women, and that they are determined, like they are destined to be this secondary humans or third humans, and that we are not, it's sort of like there is deep-seated prejudice. Because if you respect lives, for God's sake, at the minimum, 1 million people got killed in both Afghanistan and Iraq. At the minimum, at the minimum, 330,000 civilians of them. This is like, I think this is where you can record on paper, but like, I am 100% sure it's much more, right? And it's like that deep disrespect to the human emotion. Now, let's go back to humanity of other people. And this almost cannot believe there are Muslims who actually espouse different values and different perspectives on life, and they want to live in a modern society, and they want to live, and that it's almost a disbelief that Islam actually can be, I grew up in that religion, which is, there was equality, there was celebration, there was tolerance. Yes, it's a dark moment in religious history in Islam, but that does not mean, it's almost like giving the terrorists in America, giving those who have done who have rioted on January 6th, and saying, this is America. Right. This is what it feels like. It's giving that group of people, the ones with the monster looking and the beast look, right? The one, and they're saying for the world to say, this is America, haha. And then every American, your identity as Paul and everybody identity gets erased, because all what they see is that beast that, terrorize all of us, and particularly those in the capital, right? This is how it feels. It's like Taliban are our beasts. The fundamentals and the terrorists are our beasts. And these beasts are not the entire countries or the entire religion or the entire thing. So that's one. The other one, and it's because I got the chance to testify at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I don't know, during the Obama administration, to be honest, the first term. And then I got to talk with President Biden himself at that time. And it was, how do we engage in Afghanistan? That was the question. How do we pull out? And that was the question more than 8 years ago, right? How do we pull out? Mm-hmm. And I tell you, and I mean, and I'm curious about your thoughts as a former military person, a veteran, is that there was always that, I mean, I remember the testimony was with 3 people, right? Was a military expert, was me as a humanitarian, and was with the diplomat. And it started with, and this is a public testimony, and now some books are coming out of it, started with the military experts saying, this is about, we win by killing as many Taliban as possible. You win, and he said, I want to say it bluntly to you, you kill, and that's how we win. I was horrified as a humanitarian and as an Iraqi who grew up in Iraq, who's in Iran, and like, I mean, with the people, I am living and breathing with the people in Afghanistan. And I'm like, the more you kill, the more Taliban you create, because they have sons, and it doesn't matter the values, it doesn't matter. The more you kill, the more vengeance you create. The way you create peace, and then you can exit safely and peacefully, is please help them address what they want. And what they want, they were asking, and this is Afghanistan, but same in Iraq, they're like, we want roads. Can you paint the roads? Can you, like, can we invest in more jobs? Schools, we want to build. Yeah, like they wanted that to be the headline. And I worked in Afghanistan right after September 11. I mean, and right after the U.S. Arrival there. And I honestly, Paul, I would go to the Hill and beg, USAID, and beg the U.S. government, like, even if you put a poster saying a road is coming up, just please, just say something to show that there is hope. Well, a lot of the U.S. Biden himself was saying, but we invested a lot in schools and we got the goals up and all. Yes, we did. But I assure you, the money we spent on schooling and making people's life better, it's minuscule compared to how much money we spent on the military and on risking our sons and daughters' lives. And it's not, and so there's a prejudice, not only the Muslim, there's a prejudice on this notion, which I am fathomed by, because it's now framed. And I remember Biden saying himself, he's like, you are telling us that we need to engage in nation building. And I remember, many senators at the time, Senator Kerry, they were like, Biden was vice president. It was a different meeting. It was like, we are not in the business of nation building. Right. We are in the business of war. And he said that a month ago. And here's what doesn't connect to me. Sir, the more you engage in war, the more people get angry because it's about destroying their lives. There was yesterday a talk about the apologies the U.S. said about the drones that killed civilians, right? And
yeah, I want to go down. I want to drill down on that one with you, please.
Well, and there was an interview, by the New York Times with one young woman who lost her father and her fiance at the same time. And I was listening to her cry, and I have goosebumps just thinking about it, because she was livid in anger. Livid because she's like, I lost my father and my fiance at the same time, and they were civilians working with NGOs, international NGOs, right? And she was livid. And I look at, I hear her, and it's like, her anger, right? This has, when your life is destroyed, your anger is inevitable. And for the humans who go and say, I am not going to use this anger for evil, I am just going to hold my breath and use it for good, it's a discipline that not many people have the tools and the resources to have it. I have it honestly because I fucking meditate every day, excuse my F word, because I meditate, because I walk on a trail every day, and because nature helps me. But I don't know if I can hold that. If my home is destroyed and I am not able to live, and my father and my fiance got killed, right, because of a mistake. So the engagement with the world, lessons learned for me, is that the US government continued to ridicule the idea of nation building, while the civilians of Afghanistan and of Iraq, they were not, and I know nation building because they don't want to be colonized and all of these things. You know what? Actually, as a I come from a colonized country, right? Where there's so much criticism of the British and all of these things, and I'm against all colonization. And at least the British, when they colonized the region, they left railroads and they got employments, and then there are still things that we're still actually being impacted in. So as opposed to US engagement with the world was through purely the lens of war, and demonizing the idea that people actually could want just a decent life. So we've got to fundamentally look at that engagement and at that lens, because if we continue in that, we are furtherly screwed, let's say it in a polite way. I don't know if that was polite or not.
No, that whole part was a bullseye, right? And that's what people need to hear right now and need to understand. I think even the component about nation building, nation building has become a dirty word, right? And you could argue that some of nation building is humanitarian work, right? Like the basic infrastructure creation, if it comes in a different package, is humanitarian work. So nation building, the business that we were in for so long, and really since the beginning of our existence as a country, we are undermining while we do it. So we may not love nation building, but we committed to it, right? Like we built the house halfway and other people helped us build that house. And when we drop it, it makes sense that they are going to have a fear all along that we would leave. The old saying that, the Americans have the watches, we have the time. There was always this idea that we would give up, that we wouldn't have the stomach for it, we wouldn't have the time for it, and things would the Taliban would wait. And the Afghans knew that, even our partners knew that, but they never thought we were going to yank the cord like this, right? So abruptly, so disgustingly, so totally. And the piece I wanted to ask you to talk about, Zainab, because it's upside down world now where George Bush is making sense, right? Like George Bush is connecting the dots, but George Bush maybe has some experience that's helping him get to this bridge between January 6th and the Taliban or Al Qaeda or ISIS-K or whatever the iterations are. But there's still this, to me, Biden sounded a lot like Bush in the last couple of months, right? In his dismissiveness, in his black and white structure, in his lies, right? In his spin. But I want you to talk, if you can, please, about the impact of the drone strikes, and not just this one, because in my view, it was the ultimate insult. On the way out, we said, we're going to get you back, and we blow up, we fire a Hellfire missile and kill the wrong people and kill 7 kids. It's like the ultimate insult after this terrible betrayal. But maybe the bigger insult is that Americans forgot about it already. The Afghans never will. The family you talked about never will. But they've also never forgotten about 20 years of drone strikes, where drone strikes terrorize people around the world. And the other part that is really, I think, egregious is Biden saying before the UN, we are no longer at war. So he says we're no longer at war. Tim Kaine and others are saying, no, we're no longer at war, but we're still firing Hellfire missiles. We've still got drones. We've still got troops in Syria. We've still got people getting combat pay. So they're, in my view, lying. Can you talk about the reality of American drone strikes in totality over the last 20 years, what that has done to all of this?
It's because the way I want to address your question is by sharing to your viewers how it feels for the drone to be landing on your land, on your house. It's because from a US perspective, it's a clean operation, right? It's someone on a computer, it's a clean operation. We're not risking, any American lives. And it's true, but that's, unless the US shift its way of looking at the world and engaging with the world, we are in big trouble. Because yes, we are sparing American lives, right? American soldiers' lives, indeed, right? But we are not sparing America's safety. we're not and then from the person who is getting the bombs, I mean, I can't tell you how many stories I have. I mean, I come from that, from countries that they experience it. I don't know how to explain it because it's a massacre. It's really a massacre, right? And I've heard many US soldiers, who engage in, and I don't want to quote anybody, but they were saying, because it's like there's a moral injury. There is times in which you fight and it's clear fighting and it's the bad guy, right? But there are times in which, whether it is the cluster bomb or whether it is the drone, it's going to hit all these civilians, and we call them civilian casualties or whatever, whatever it is. That is, I mean, I want to cry right now because it shows the fundamental disrespect to human lives when it is non-Americans. And we cannot, because that makes people, when people hurt when America entered Afghanistan and when America entered Iraq, it was true. It was true what President Bush said, that they will welcome, but it wasn't they welcoming the army. They were welcoming the idea that America, the country they look up to and love, may help them the way they helped the Japanese and the Germans rebuild their lives. That's what they were welcoming, not that the fact that they were soldiers going to come and knock on their doors in the middle of the night and raid their homes, and not that. I mean, there was a brilliant article in the New Yorker about the other Afghan women, and it was the showing the discrepancy between the educated Afghan women in Kabul and were becoming parliamentarian and journalists and judges and aspiring and all of that, right? And then there were the very poor Afghan women who are in small provinces and small villages where their fighting was still between the US and the Taliban. And they talk about each, and it's a great article, everyone should read it. I was crying at the end of the article. Every woman has about 16 members of her family, immediate family, dead. Her husband, her father, her brothers, her sons, and they're killed. They were not Taliban. They were all civilian casualties. All, a car passes by a house, so let's throw a drone on it, and the car, because it's Toyota, then all Taliban use Toyota. I mean, that there were decision-making being made by some people in Washington, D.C., out of context to the reality on the ground, out of completely lack of respect to the reality on the ground, and completely lack of humility, that knowledge does not come only from some, sterile offices with computers and the smartness of how do you do that. Yeah. To build peace, we've got to engage the human beings as human beings and show respect to them. And we lacked that. We truly lack that.
There's a part of the drone strikes that I think is important to pull apart, because in some ways it's the ultimate disrespect of humanity, because you don't even kill them in person. Right? Like it is remote, it is disconnected, it is over the horizon, right? Is now the term. Over the horizon also means removing the emotional connection, removing the personal responsibility, dialing it in, right? Now, you keep Americans safe, but you also remove the American ability to have discretion in a difficult environment, and you remove the accountability, right? Like, so I think it's such an important point for people to understand, even the apology, the non-apology apology. No restitution. The president took days to acknowledge it. 7 kids are dead. They blew up a guy who was putting water bottles in the back of his truck. And I've been in those situations where they get it wrong. They shoot the wrong house. And then it's disposable. So I think that is the piece that really outrages me about Biden in particular, and about this administration and Psaki and the others who want to whitewash it. So for many people, it's already in the rearview mirror. Let me ask you, there's a demonstration coming up this weekend, September 25th. You're promoting and leading. I see you're getting people to stand with Afghan women. I saw a T-shirt with Hugh Jackman's wearing it, right? But you're doing what you do. You're mobilizing, you're organizing, you're humanizing this, and we're gonna be allies again in another fight, right? Working on this, even if our government won't. So can you tell us what is happening on September 25th, and what needs to happen now? You've been through this before, unfortunately, right? What do we need people to do now if Biden won't do shit, frankly?
Yeah, I don't trust Biden doing shit right now, to be honest. And I wish he does some shit, because again, like that, the drone attack on these civilians, they were like, at least help us get out of the Afghanistan. And the US, they're still allies in Afghanistan, Paul. They're still journalists and they're still interpreters. I'm working with them on daily basis in Afghanistan, stuck fluent English. Brilliant, worked with the US Army, and they feel so, I mean, when you humanize, when you talk to these individuals, it's just heartbreaking because they believed in America, and when you believe and love someone and they betray you, that's harder. It goes like the sword goes really deep in the heart, because you can't be betrayed by someone you don't love. So you can only get betrayed by someone you love. And these people loved and trusted and put their lives in the front lines with America to build together. They really, it's just, so the job is not done. I mean, I know a lot of the news have moved on, but I am telling you, there are thousands of allies still in I mean, I can't believe it. Biden's like, 30,000 people out and all of that. We are still struggling to get people out. Until today, we are still struggling to get people out, men, women, children, everything. So a couple of things, what we have done, so we created an alliance and a coalition of women. Basically, because there was no prioritization with women. And I have to tell you, Paul, honestly, there was no prioritization, not in terms of plan to evacuate them. Even when we pulled a coalition of women together, raise about $10 million so we can have our own funds to either charter planes or pay for seats or pay for any modes to get them out. We were elbowed by some of the men in the administration, because it's like, no, we don't want this. We had to fight for every woman that we got out, just so, just to be, because that sexism is sort of so embedded. And again, I feel like what came clear to me in here, that I no longer want anybody to give good speeches about women. I want people to act about women. And we really need to understand why this is not only women, this is a safety of everyone. They are just the bellwether. They are just the indicator. They're just the lowest hanging fruits. And so that was one. So there we got some women out. These people who are getting out, just so you know, most of them, don't still have SIV visas, so they are worked with the US for 10 years, 20 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever. There's just no one, there's no even a road to show SIV visa. So we are scrambling to get them out, right? And we're scrambling, and really shame, scrambling to get them to a third country for safety, because Pakistan is not safe and is not accepting them for the variety of political reasons. But we're begging, we're calling countries at a time. This is civilians calling countries, please, Spain, can you give them some visas? Please, Portugal. I mean, we're not spared a prime minister or a foreign prime minister or whatever it is. Please, we beg you. And this is civilians doing that, right? And scrambling for other countries to solve something that we have created, and at least get a clear process. So our allies, okay, we'll get them, but can you please expedite their SIV? So then we don't have a process to get them visas in here. This could take a year. These are, educated people. They are the creme de la creme of society. Right now, they're in this unknown, reality. How are they going to live? Where they're going to earn their living? There's some of them going to cold areas. They all left with carry-on. They don't have their computers. They don't have anything, right? So that's one reality we're dealing with. There is zero understanding of can they expedite their entry in the US? Can we please get them? No understanding. And then, so here's a question. So there's one is we need to continue these evacuation efforts. That's one. Second, they are, whatever we get out managed, thousands of people. There are hundreds of thousands and millions of people who are still in Afghanistan, right? And there's still hundreds of thousands of women are still in Afghanistan. And so for me, priority one is evacuate the ones we can. and that's still going. Priority 2, or the same priority, but make sure that every government, every engagement with the Taliban has to, like every financial transaction with the Taliban, whether it's by the UN or the US or the World Bank or any individual bank or whatever, must prioritize and allocate funds directly to women and girls. Not through government, but through directly women and girls. Because the minute we acknowledge them, they wanted to send their envoy to the UN. Imagine we have a Taliban envoy to the UN. We cannot acknowledge them, because the minute we acknowledge them, we legitimize them. And when they legitimize them, we are screwing every single Afghan resistance inside of Afghanistan. It makes it much harder. So we cannot acknowledge them and recognize them and legitimize them. But there needs to be funds going inside.
That's a really important point, where I think people don't understand they have agency now. They have power, right? Like, we should be undermining the Taliban, right? There is a resistance. There is an expat resistance. There's a resistance inside Afghanistan. We should be supporting the resistance, undermining the Taliban. If we're not going to do it ourselves, we've fought by proxy for hundreds of years in this country. This is where we need to shift the administration, in my view, and Congress, not to just accept. I'm going to keep using the example, not just accept Gilead, right? And somewhere June is inside, June from Handmaid's Tale, and other handmaids are organizing and fighting back, and we need to support them. And the more we acknowledge the Taliban and acknowledge Gilead, the more doomed they are. So can you talk specifically about the demonstration September 25th?
Yes.
What's
September
happening?
25th. September 25th is happening in New York, it's happening in LA, it's happening in 55 other cities and countries around the world, from Croatia to Turkey to a whole bunch of countries. Go to 1 Billion Rising to register and attend. I will be here in New York. It's going to be in front of the UN Plaza, and please come. We are, and here, so that's one thing, right? Come, please, because the world needs to hear. They need to hear us. Here's the thing, Paul. They are going to be in June inside of Afghanistan, right? They're resisting in their own ways. It is vitally important that they hear us saying, I hear you.
Right.
Because they are resisting inside. And if you don't hear the world saying, it's like someone saying, hello, hello, hello. It's important for someone outside to say, I hear you, I hear you, I hear you. That is important. So the reason we need to join in the demonstration is because it is important. And the reason, beyond the demonstration on September 25th, we need to continue the drum beat going, whether it's demonstrating constantly, whether in every engagement. If you are a filmmaker, write about Afghanistan. If you're a congressman, make sure, like whatever you do, put Afghanistan and Afghan women particularly in the priority, because we cannot forget. The first thing Biden wants is to put a bow on the story and finish it and all of that. It is upon all of us, again, for a variety of reasons. One, out of our moral obligation, moral for us, our morality, not our values, not this. Ours. We need to protect these values that I so love about America. So it's upon right now civilians and citizens to protect these values. One. B, the takeover of Taliban is going to lead to national insecurity, regional insecurity throughout the region, is an existential threat to all the allies in the region, and to Islam itself. And guess what? When ISIS came and took over Iraq, one third of Iraq, we also thought this is something they have to deal with. Well, it terrorized the whole entire world. It terrorized every citizen in America for 3 years, if you remember, right? That's what the Taliban are. It's not an isolated incident in Afghanistan. It's going to be impacting all of our psyche and our security. And so we've got to keep the drum beat going in every sector you are in. If you have a store, put I stand for Afghan women. If you're like anything, because we cannot forget, and we will not forget until they are safe and until there is an exit out of this horrible story. I want to say one thing, because I was horrified by hearing it. The US forced the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban from prison. It's the US who forced them. It's not the Afghan government. And these 5,000 Taliban, who we spent so much time and efforts and humans to find them and to track them and to imprison them, are now leading. Shame. you know, on
and they may be invited to the UN. and that's
so allow that to happen.
I am glad that you pulled the Jedi uniform out of the closet and you came down from the outdoors. You and I have shared this change, and we've both been pulled back into it by events. But I am grateful for your leadership and your sacrifice. You are a warrior for peace, and you're one of my true heroes. And I think that this is what people need to understand. The Taliban is not a country. It's a movement. And we have an obligation to fight that movement in the same way we fought fascism in World War II. If you let it go, it spreads. You can't just let Hitler hang out in Germany. We can't let the Taliban hang out in Afghanistan. This is one of the most important fights of our time, and we've got to support the Jedis who are outside like you and the Jedis who are inside still fighting. Everybody should support the demonstrations on September 25th. Zainab also has a new podcast coming, and you should support and check that out. Follow her on social media. She is a true champion. And I adore you. And I'm so grateful you spent so much time with us. I hope you'll come back and call me anytime you need a bodyguard.
Thank you. Paul, I have to say, because the first time I met you and here you are a veteran, you know, and I was like, oh my God, a fighter and all that. And you talked about love. And I was so touched, so deeply touched at that first moment I met you. And I'm still touched by your friendship and by your love and by your respect and by your big heart for calling the truth, actually. And it's an honor truly to be in this conversation and to be a friend and call you a brother. Thank you so much. Thank you.
We'll keep cranking it up. The fight in, you know, the fight for the American military may be over, but the bigger fight has just begun. And it's going to be long and hard, but I got your back, you got mine, and we'll go for some walks near Edward R. Murrow's house. And if you never heard episode 9, go back, because Zainab has maybe the best car story we ever had. I'll ask her to stick around for a couple quick fire questions for our Patreon members, but thank you for all you do. You are a true helper, and stay vigilant, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much.